My name is Jessie Ace. I'm part of a group of enabled warriors that you've probably never heard of. We're fighting back against our invisible illness and taking the dis out of disability. We don't give sympathy to our symptoms. They enable us to be the warrior that we are. If you ask doctors and nurses, they'd say what we're doing is impossible. But pushing the limits of our conditions is something that we have to break through every single day. If we push the limits, we are mentally strong, and we can do anything. The question is, how far can we push those limits? This podcast will give you the answers. I'm Jessie Ace, and this is the Disabled to Enabled podcast. Experience the benefits of pure hive power with the bee-powered honey. This therapeutic blend of royal jelly, bee pollen, propolis, and raw honey is designed to support those heavy, low-energy kind of days while supporting your immune system, promoting mental clarity and encouraging overall balance. Try a spoonful on those sleepy mornings, napless afternoons, and before intense workouts. So go and click the link in the show note and invest in your health today. Enabled Warriors, our next guest on the show is an international speaker, writer, podcaster, and action taker who also loves diabetes topics that are off the beaten track. She's passionate to find motivational and inspiring ways to bring about a change in diabetes management. Through her own company, she's inspired thousands of people with diabetes to live a healthier life by sharing her own story and experiences, as well as the puzzle pieces that she's helped others to find. She has a profound understanding of how things like nutrition and lifestyle choices can balance diabetes. And she's also the co-founder of the very first interactive 100% real food event of its kind in Europe, called the Low Carb Universe. How cool is that? Where a mix of lectures and workshops make it possible to dig deeper into interesting topics and learn from each other. Enabled Warriors, please help me in welcoming today's guest, the fabulous founder of Hana, diabetes expert, Hanna Boethius, everybody. Woo!
Yay! Woohoo! Thank you so much for having me, Jessie. That's so nice.
Thank you so much for being here. It's awesome. Okay, let's get into the first part of our interview. So this part focuses on when you first started to get symptoms, which later revealed a diagnosis. Keep listening, Enabled Warriors, to find out how today's guests coped and thrived afterward in episode 2 with some questions from our Enabled Warriors Facebook group if we have any, and then keep on listening for episode 3 for today's guest answers to the not so super quick secrets round. There we go. Oh my gosh, let's dive right in, okay, for part 1. So you've been living with type 1 diabetes now for 35 years, Hannah, and Hashimoto's thyroiditis for 7 years.
Yep.
So and you said that Hashimoto's is kind of the one in remission and stuff. So can you tell us like how you were diagnosed with these things? What happened on that day?
I wish I could remember how I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, as I was only 2 years old. It's a bit of a while ago. I mean, who can have 35 years of experience of something when they're only 25? I don't really know, but stranger things have happened. No, but also in all seriousness, all I know is what my parents have told me from that sort of time. And my mom didn't quite recognize me, her daughter. I was falling asleep everywhere. I had to go to the bathroom a lot or wet my diapers or whatever it was at that time. I was drinking a lot. I didn't have an appetite, or then I would have a real appetite because, my body wasn't getting the energy, of course, that it was needing. And she's like, okay, right, there's something that is wrong here, and I'm going to take her to a doctor. And that was, of course, with a fingerprint test, even in 1985. In 1985, it was a fingerprint test, although it took a long time to get the results. But it was very quickly established what it was, and it was type 1 diabetes, meaning that the beta cells in my pancreas had started getting attacked by my immune system. So they have started shutting down, or started to get kicked out, really. That is basically what type 1 diabetes is. It's basically you don't produce enough insulin for your body so that it can work properly. And insulin is really needed by so many things in the body. It is the master hormone that regulates everything from hunger to satiety to blood sugar to all of these things. Wow. And that's why it's so important. And when that gets kicked out, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
And so I was put on insulin syringes at that part. Yes, at that point it was insulin syringes still, and that has since progressed to insulin pens, and then an insulin pump, and then another insulin pump, and all this stuff. But to this day, at 35 years later, yay, I am still taking insulin externally, and I will do so until the day I die, unless they find a cure, which would be amazing.
Well, you never know, any day now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have been promised for the past 35 years, in 5 to 10 years, there will be a cure.
Every 5 to 10 years.
I'm kind of still waiting. So yeah, I think people should get on that. Anyway, and so yeah, that was 35 years ago, and then 7 years ago, my antibodies, my thyroid antibodies started climbing. Ooh. And that's when my doctor diagnosed me with early stage of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the immune system again, those pesky little happy people attacking another organ, which means that I have at least 2 autoimmune diseases that I know about. And yeah, so it's basically an autoimmune attack on your thyroid, and that can make you really like sluggish, and it can make you gain weight, and it can make you, it's a lot to do with metabolism. So that's why it has so many metabolic sort of effects, that disease. But I managed to kick that into remission. I have completely normal levels otherwise. I just have slightly elevated antibodies, just like it was 7 years ago. So I'm very happy about that. So wow. I don't have to deal with everything. And I was on medication for a while for the Hashimoto's, but I could basically, it ran out, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and see how bad it gets, because it's not like a life supporting medication.
Yeah.
And I actually felt better without it. So I'm like, okay, now I'm done.
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard to know if the medicine is actually, helping, or whether it's actually causing more side effects and more kind of, that sort of trauma, I guess, of having to deal with that every day.
Yeah, and then it's also with diabetes, and with dosing insulin, it's really a guesstimation. Like, you can know all the carbs, because that's the classic model. You count the amount of carbs that you have in a meal. You know what amount of insulin you should take for that amount of carbs. You take it, but then there's 42 other factors that actually influence blood sugar, and you have no idea if one of them kicks in, one of them hasn't kicked in, that you've been counting on. So it's a lot of guesstimation work when dosing actually a really potentially dangerous medicine.
Gosh, yeah. Like, okay, so I don't really have any idea about diabetes, apart from a friend that I had when I was about 9, I think.
Yeah.
He had diabetes, and so I kind of saw it a little bit, but I didn't quite understand it at that age. So, like, can you just go through, briefly explain, like, what diabetes is, how it affects you day to day, and how that kind of affects your food as well?
Of course. Well, diabetes is, in the case of type 1, as I said before, that the body can't produce enough insulin to sustain the need in the body. And that's the difference to type 2, which is what, a lot of it used to be a lot of older people who got type 2. And that's basically when the body doesn't recognize it. Still produces insulin, but the cells don't recognize it, so it can't actually take the energy out of the food in that way. And that's why it sort of leads to, or that's why it's thought that it leads to overweight a lot of times and stuff like that. So that's the difference between the two things, or the two main types of diabetes, rather. And then there's gestational, and there's very many smaller, but we won't get that boring here. How it affects my day-to-day life, I mean, it's always at the back of my mind, because I always have to, it's a 24/7, 365 job that you don't get paid for. No one is appreciative of you doing it, apart from yourself, because you're keeping yourself alive. You're basically acting like your own pancreas, like your own organ. And you then have to, without any knowledge from the other systems in the body, you have to make those decisions for that organ, which, when I put it that way, and I know it sounds very dramatic, in everyday life, it becomes second nature. And I have lots of devices. I have an insulin pump, and I have a continuous glucose monitor that, really, really helps me to keep things in check. And unfortunately, they don't talk to each other, at least not in my case. There are some that do, but and that makes it, I don't know. I can do without, it's fine. I manage without anyway. And so I have a lot of tools at hand to actually help me with the management of this. But of course, it's at the back of my mind at all times. Oh, how am I feeling? Oh, what is my blood sugar doing? Is it going up? Is it going down? Do I need to treat? Do I need to have more sugar? Do I need to take more insulin? Oh, am I dehydrated? Huge thing. Oh, did I? Oh, maybe I didn't. Yeah, maybe I didn't sleep that well last night, and that's why my blood sugar level is affected. There's so many variables, and that's why I call it more of a guesstimation work than anything else, because you just never know for sure what is actually going on.
Wow. So it is literally affected by pretty much anything, it sounds like. Can you feel like when your blood sugar is high or low? Can you
yeah, I can. It didn't used to be like that because as I know we're going to get into a little bit later, I made every mistake that I could, but I didn't used to be able to feel it, but now I do feel it. I can feel when it's even sinking or when it's going up, and it's, but sometimes your body gives you the wrong signals as well. So, for example, a couple of mornings ago, I woke up and I'm like super thirsty, and I'm like, oh my God. This is like a classic sign of a really high blood sugar. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what went wrong? What did I do? And then I checked my blood sugar, and it was completely normal. Like, even for a healthy person, it was completely normal. And I'm like, I was just thirsty. This is so foreign to me. Yeah, so I mean, also sometimes you get sort of curveballs thrown at you.
Yeah, I can imagine. Gosh. And so food-wise then, so how do you kind of manage the food day to day? Because you were saying something about carbs relating to insulin.
Yeah, so that's a classic way of doing it, which I was doing for a very, very long time. A certain amount of carbs, and then you sort of adjust insulin to your needs. So you have to measure your blood sugar, check how many carbs there is in a meal, and then take insulin according to that. Guesstimate the amount of insulin that you need for that.
Wow.
This took me, in hindsight, it took me way too long to realize that this didn't quite fit me. But I was at the same time, since the very low age of diagnosis up until when I started thinking a little bit of my own, or on my own, which was at age about 28, so 26 years later, I followed it. I followed the official guidelines for diabetes, which is 60% carbs with every meal. You should have at least 6 meals a day, just to keep your blood sugar steady. Yes, it becomes steady, but it becomes like steady up here. You sort of, okay, in the 80s it was different, because then we had different insulins, and then you had to sort of feed the insulin because it acted in a completely different way than the modern ones do now. Now we can be like, okay, let's go. It's very, very flexible, and you can be much more flexible with it.
Yeah.
But so this made sense until the new insulins came. But now what I found works for me, and I can't speak for anyone else, but this is what I sort of talk about a lot, is that instead of complicating the equation with all the carbs and all the insulin, and also fat and proteins to a certain extent affect blood sugar. So instead of doing that, I removed most of the carbs out of the equation.
Wow, okay.
So that I could basically be more on point with my calculations, and more on sort of be more flexible in my management, be more, just see how I could how I could improve my own diabetes management, because at that point I was very, very I was not in a good state at all, mentally or physically, or I found out afterwards that my kidneys had started getting affected by diabetes at that point. No one told me because they didn't want to worry me, because it wasn't very bad yet, but you didn't have to do anything. But, it was just under observation. But I wasn't told this until years afterwards. Anyway, but this has now, since removing this huge part of the puzzle, or filling it in, or how I should say. This has actually gone back, and now my kidneys work perfectly fine like a normal person, thanks to that I have normalized my blood sugar and have basically normal blood sugars like anyone. It does take a lot of work, and it gets a little bit tricky in social situations, but after 8 years of eating a small amount of carbs, I've really gotten quite good at, figuring the social part out of it. So
yeah, it just
for me, it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah. I mean, what was it like when you were having friends like saying, "Oh, let's go out for a restaurant for dinner, and let's go out and do this, and let's come over and have a sleepover and have pizza and things." I bet that was like, "Oh, I can't do that."
Yeah, I mean, 8 years ago it was like, "Oh my God, what should I do? What should I say? How can I handle this situation?" When I was a kid, of course, I followed the guidelines anyway, so that was, the normal stuff that I was eating, so it didn't matter. But 8 years ago, and I'm like, okay, how can I make this work for me? I don't really care about anyone else, because I'm doing this for me and for my health and to improve me, rather than making other people happy. And what I found out was actually that I made a game out of it. So on every menu, from McDonald's to the fanciest Italian to like anything, I'm like, okay, the game is, here are the rules. Find the meal or combine the meal that has the least amount of carbs, and then order that. And I'm like, so now I'm actually quite a wizard at that. I'm like, this one. Oh, I see you have asparagus here. I will take that steak with that asparagus. And oh, I see you have herb butter there. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I am a terrible customer at restaurants, but luckily restaurants usually want to please their customers. So
yeah, for sure.
That. Thank you, all the restaurants out there.
Thank you, restaurants, absolutely. And it's good that you have the confidence to really step up and just say, like, okay, I need this. Like, do people ever kind of treat you slightly differently because of that?
They used to. They used to, definitely. But in my mind, how would they treat me if these complications of diabetes would have gone on, and I would have gotten blind, or amputated a foot, or my kidneys would have failed and I have to be on dialysis every 3 days. I mean, it's just, for me personally, I can't say for anyone else, but for me it's a very small investment of being the weird one that doesn't eat carbs instead of, because the other version just didn't work for me. I tried it for 26 years and I got failure after failure after failure, and I had to dust myself off, bring myself back up, and for 8 years I'm like, okay, I got this. I got it.
That is awesome. So going back like right to the start then, I mean, what was it like growing up with diabetes and knowing that you have to kind of have those insulin injections and things? And I mean, did you have to have those at school?
No, the insulins were still really like ancient back when I went to school, that. Anyway, it was a while ago. So I actually didn't. I actually had to have extra snacks instead, and got to leave the classroom and have extra snacks, which was actually kind of fun because it made me feel special. But yeah, of course, I was. My parents tried to make such a minimal deal out of it as they could. They were really like trying to downplay it, and you're just like all the other kids and blah blah blah, which I'm very thankful for. But at the same time, I would have almost rather been different in my way of eating already then, so that I could have skipped all the worry, all the hassle, all the tears, all the sweat, all the hard work that I had to put in the middle until I finally sort of got to my way of dealing with it. But yeah, I was definitely different, and especially at sleepovers, because then it was, of course, insulin time, both in the evening and in the morning, and it was all like, it was not so much fun, actually.
How did like friends and things react to you doing that?
They knew about it, and when I was a kid, for a very long time, I was the only one in school who had diabetes, which was weird because I grew up in Finland, and Finland actually has one of the world's highest rates of type 1 diabetes. It wasn't until like I got to 4th grade or something, another girl in my class got it, and we had to have a nurse come in and be like explaining that it It's not contagious.
Oh gosh.
Autoimmune disease, this is what happens in the body. And I'm like, yeah.
Wow. But that must have been really good to find somebody who gets it.
Yeah, definitely. At the time, and that's what I also appreciate so much now with the diabetic online community. It almost becomes like diabetes therapy, because no one, of course, I don't know, I can't really speak for other chronic illnesses, but especially in diabetes, no one ever speaks about the mental side of living with a chronic disease or chronic illness.
Yeah.
And I know we've spoken about it before, but and that's the sort of the hardest part almost. You can get help medically with, adjusting your doses, and you can get help with food if you need it, and you can get help with all these things. But the mental aspect of living with a chronic illness, a chronic thing the whole time, and it's always at the back of your mind, is overlooked a lot, I find. And that's the biggest. Yeah.
Gosh, yeah, you're so right there. Absolutely right. So, okay, before we go into part 2, what would you say are the 5 tips you could give someone living with diabetes?
There is always a way for you to manage your diabetes better. Even for me, there's always improvement points, which you don't let it get you down though, because that's the other danger, that you just get overwhelmed by all these options. No, but there's always a way that works for you, and it doesn't have to be necessarily what you get told by the healthcare professionals, perhaps. You have to be a little bit willing to experiment with yourself. If you feel comfortable. If not, then don't do it. But research your options, maybe, is the first point.
Yeah, definitely.
Then not only in terms of management, but also in terms of medication, you are the one who in the end decides. If you are an empowered and informed patient, which you should be, because no one's going to take care of you better than you, or for more time than you are. So I find it very, very helpful to be quite read up on what management things are there out there, what medicines, what insulins are available, what tools, what sort of help can you get, and then sort of pick and choose and discuss with your doctor and your consultant what could fit for you in their medical opinion, but also from your sort of lifestyle requirements, to put it that way. What else do we have? I have so many, I can't even decide. Make sure that you're living your life for you and not for diabetes. You live with diabetes, you have diabetes, it's a part of you, but it's not you. It's not the whole of you. So it is a part, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller part of you, but remember that it is a part of you. It's not the whole you. Find support. That's number 4, right? Yeah. Find support, whether that's online, whether that's peers with the same sort of situations, with the same treatments, with the same things that they're going through, or whether it's a coach or a nurse that you really get along with, or some other medical professional, or, just friends and family who are super supportive of you and want you to feel well. Just make sure that you have that support network, because there are days where everything comes tumbling down and you need to turn to these people. No matter how well managed and adjusted you are, we all have shitty days, and it's completely okay, but we also need someone to turn to in those cases.
Yes, absolutely.
We do. And then really try to live your best life despite this. No one's going to thank you for sitting at home feeling super sorry for yourself, because you have this actually pretty awesome thing, because it gives you completely different awareness. It gives you completely different awareness of your body, your health, your mood, how people react around you, what people's opinions are. It's amazing, the things that you realize when you have to pay a little bit more attention to yourself and how you're feeling the whole time. So that would be my 5 top tips.
That's amazing.
Diabetes everywhere.
They are amazing tips. Oh, Enabled Warriors, thank you so much for listening. This is episode 1, all wrapped up. In the next episode, we will discuss the amazing things that Hannah has done since her diagnosis and all the crazy mistakes that she made at the start, because I'm very excited to hear that. The look of shame on your face is funny. So Warriors, look out for episode 2. Is there anything else that we've spoken about so far that you can relate to? If so, please tell us in a comment. And while you're there, remember to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening today. Thank you so much, Hannah. See you in a sec. Are you ready to fight back against your chronic illness and go from being disabled to enabled? Do you want to be an enabled warrior? Someone who's brave, strong, and confident, and someone who's ready to find a way to achieve awesome things despite a diagnosis. This is your invitation. Check out disabled2enabled.com for articles and reviews to find out how you can become enabled too. Subscribe to the podcast to always be in the know. If you think this podcast is better than sleeping in on a Sunday, tickle that subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening. And make sure to share this episode with someone who needs some inspiration. Want to ask your questions to future guests? Make sure to join our Enabled Warriors tribe on Facebook and look out for our question posts. Before we go, check out Disabled2Enabled on Instagram for posts that tell it like it is. And remember, warriors, stay enabled.